Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that the right book at the right time can change lives, and that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do here on the Kid Lit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature: picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels for readers of all ages. In each episode, we'll talk with children's literature authors and discuss their books, their hopes, their dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. Whether you're an adult reading to their inner child or connecting the young readers in your life with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of Kid Lit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Kid Lit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your Kid Lit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Katie Kennedy. Katie is an American history professor who has written books that get us excited about history. She's the author of The Constitution Decoded, The President's Decoded, and Did You Hear What Happened in Salem? She's here today to celebrate her newest release, The Declaration Decoded, a guide to the document that inspired our nation. This inviting book goes through the Declaration of Independence, sentence by sentence and idea by idea, giving readers not only a deep understanding of the language, but also the historical background against which it was written and the powerful arguments it makes, some of which we are still having almost 250 years later. I couldn't believe how much I learned. I couldn't believe how much I wanted to learn because of this book, and I can't wait to talk about it with her, so we are going to get right to the episode. Katie, welcome to Kid Lit Love. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, I like history. I like learning new facts, but I didn't expect to be as excited about your book as I was going page by page and idea by idea. So I can't wait to jump into your newest book in particular. But before we do, I'd love for you to tell listeners just a bit about you and the work that you do and the journey you've taken through children's literature to this newest book you're celebrating today.
Yeah, sure. So I didn't start writing until a little bit older than some people. I teach history, and that's telling stories, and that sort of scratched that itch, right? So I'm a storyteller. Um, but our son got cancer when he was one, and it was a bad case of bad cancer. It was a tough time, and I stopped doing things during that. I stopped, showering and breathing and so on. Um, a woman, a year or two later, in the back of my church, handed me a Lee Child, adult thriller, and said, "You need to read this." And I didn't have time for anything. I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "No, you do." And I said, "Thanks, but I really don't." And she said, "No, I think you really do." And I thought, well, the rule of threes, right? If this were a picture book, I'd have to take the
Yes.
book. So I took the book and I thought, this is a weird lady. And I started reading it. And about page three, I was like, oh, this is fun. I remember fun. I remember books. This is great. She was right. This random woman knew I needed to read a book and reached out and pushed past my resistance. Um, and then once I began to read again, I think I just sort of naturally began to write. But the first book that came out was a YA. It's called Learning to Swear in America. It's an incoming asteroid situation with a teen physicist brought in from Russia who's learning to have a life at the same time life may be ending. And that was inspired by me teaching the Enlightenment. I had an evening Enlightenment class, and it talked about Immanuel Kant's statement, "Do what is right, though the world should perish," which has always meant something to me. Do what is right, that the world should perish. And I put my main character, Yuri, in a situation that if he does what is right, the world will perish in a very real sense. He has to be unethical, and then there's the ethical dilemmas with that. So I gave him some difficult problems. I'm probably the only person who writes a YA based on Immanuel Kant, but you don't want to market based on that, right? Um, and then the second one is called What Goes Up. and that's a sci-fi. The first was classified as sci-fi, but I didn't really think it was. Um, but the second one has two main characters, Rosa and Eddie, who compete for spots in a NASA program to deal with other worlds and things like this. And the first line of the book is NASA stored the future in a hangar in Iowa. Well, we didn't live in Iowa at the time, had no intention of moving here. And then we did. And a couple of years later, my husband said, "We moved to right where you set that book, didn't we?" I said, "Yeah, we did." And he said, "You couldn't have set it in Paris?" So, oh well. Um, but so that one came out. And then I Workman Kids wanted to do a book on the U.S. Constitution, and they needed somebody who already knew the document. They were in a really short time, and so a fast timeline. So they wanted somebody who already knew it and had taught it and didn't have to get up to speed with that. So I did that, and that started the Constitution Decoded, and then the Presidents Decoded, which is a collective biography of the presidents, and then this book that just came out, the Declaration Decoded, about the Declaration of Independence. And we also have a series going on Did You Hear About? Did you hear what happened? Did you hear what happened in Salem about the witch trials? Did you hear what happened about at the Alamo? Comes out this fall, and then at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire comes out next year. That was a fire in 1911 in New York City, where 146 people died when the owner locked the door, trying to prevent theft that he estimated at about $8 to $12 a year.
Wow.
So
You've been busy. I didn't
I
realize
have.
that you had those other books coming out as well. Yeah. So just
I've been very
taking
busy. Yeah.
your love of the topic, your interest in the topic, your work with the topic, and then funneling it into these books that make it so accessible for younger readers. Ah, so my
Yeah.
question then, as I kind of alluded to in the introduction, my question is how do you do it so well? Because as I mentioned, I mean, I like learning new things, but I wouldn't have said I was a particular history buff that had said, let me read the Declaration of Independence. Right?
Right.
But once you start turning the pages here and you get that kind of old school language, the real life document, and then you get this real world, oh, this is what it means. You realize that, okay, it's all still relevant and there are lots of things that we need to be thinking about today. And I'm just
Right.
curious of how you put it in such easy to understand, yet also interesting ways for readers. Like, how do you make that transition to get us interested in these documents like you do?
Well, thank you. First of all, um, I try to do two things. I try to think about the reader, and I try to think about the document. Um, and of course, you're trying to bring those together. Um, and I try to go along with the reader because kids are discovering things for the first time. So things that might be kind of, jaded for adults. I mean, it's there's a certain amount of like, what the heck moment with so many things. I found that writing the book on the Salem witchcraft trials, I really had trouble with that book for the first couple of weeks or so. I thought, what have I done to myself? I signed a contract. How do I get out of this? I mean, I'm supposed to explain this, and it is inexplicable. All of the things that we can use, all of the explanatory devices, othering people, women, power, money, all of these things, Puritan religious ideology. None of it really fully explains all this. And I was complaining about this to my editor, and I said, I just feel like I'm saying, I'm a breathless 8-year-old explaining it to another 8-year-old. And then this happened, and then this, and then this, and then they killed a couple of dogs in case they were witches. And she said, lean into it. Go ahead and lean into that. And it gave me such freedom to be able to approach it honestly, to be able to say, this does not make sense. I ain't making it up, but this is what happened. So I really appreciated being given that freedom to admit that some of this stuff is kind of crazy. Um, and as an historian, I always start with the primary sources. For the presidents, I didn't want to just go and find something that it could be typical I wanted to start with the documents and not read backwards, right? And I wanted to explain to kids a little bit of how we know what we know. What does an historian do?
Hmm.
How do these things? So the primary sources are important. Abraham Lincoln went through the Civil War with his pocket watch right next to his hip, and when Fort Sumter was fired upon, Lincoln's pocket watch was in the repair shop, uh, and the guy who was repairing it hears, of course, that the nation has been attacked and we're at war, and he scratched on the inside of Lincoln's pocket watch case. Um, you know, about Fort Sumter and said, "Thank God we have a government," and closed that. And Lincoln probably never saw that. He probably never knew that he had that watchmaker's hopes and prayers with him in a very immediate, proximity all through the war there. But I think it's kind of a cool thing. A pocket watch can be a primary source document.
Yeah.
A green coconut, when John F. Kennedy, was shipwrecked during World War II and was cast on an island and scratched into a green coconut asking for help. That's a primary source. And I think it's kind of cool to get kids excited about those things and
Yeah.
help them understand how we know what we know. We don't just make this up.
Yeah. Okay, it all just made sense to me on why your book is so easy to read and exciting to read is because I just felt your excitement. Like, oh, mom is the primary source of coconuts. That is why 8, 9, and 10-year-olds and 40-something-year-olds are interested in your content because you can feel it. You can feel your love for it, your interest in it on the page, and it all just made sense as listeners are listening, but I get to see you right now as we're recording, and I could see it in your face. I could see the excitement. So mystery solved of how you did this. Now, looking specifically at the Declaration Decoded, we're approaching the 250th anniversary of the document. And it feels like it's more important than ever. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how such a very old, important document still, perhaps, I would say that you would agree, have just things for us to continue to think about and given some of the world events today. But why is it so important from your point of view to have young people really understand this old document in relation to today's times?
Yeah, this the Declaration of Independence was the nation's first and most important document of resistance, of protest, of trash talk. There's quite a bit of 18th century trash talk in here. NBA players, take note. Um,
Yeah.
and it contains some of the most beautiful lines ever written by an American. Probably the most beautiful language ever written by someone who wasn't Abraham Lincoln. Um, is kind of in a class of his own. And it embodies our political principles. And it's good to remember that we have political principles and that we are founded on ideas that we have not always lived into, but we've always tried to. It's an aspirational document. It's a document of enormous courage. The people who signed it were in immediate danger of losing their lives because they signed it. And they knew that. They went in with no expectations that they weren't. Caesar Rodney, delegate from Delaware, rode 80 miles overnight. They didn't pass it the first time they tried to pass independence. And they went to get Caesar Rodney, who wasn't there. And he rode 80 miles overnight, which is almost impossible. Tell that to a friend who rides, and they'll say, I don't think he probably could have done that. And he did. We're not asking. He walked in with muddy boots, which was shocking in his era, and walked to the front and signed his name. And Caesar Rodney had cancer, and the best hope for him to live was to go to a doctor in England, and he had immediately cut off that avenue. So his jeopardy was not just that of everybody else, that they might be captured by British troops and hanged. He had cancer on his face, and cut off his best avenue of treatment. And as soon as they brought word that they needed him, he simply walked out and got on his horse. He didn't do anything else. He just walked out, got on his horse, rode 80 miles through the dark, crossed 6 rivers, and got there in time to sign his name and to vote for independence. So anyway, it's a moment of enormous heroism. It's a reminder that we can do difficult things, that we can speak with passion, with eloquence, even though we've gotten used to mean social media posts and we relate to each other in those ways now. and that we can be a better people. And I think that's important.
Oh, it's important. Yeah, it's still important more than ever. And, I will admit going through this book line by line, and I love I do want listeners to just get a sense of the format because I love the format because it helped me wrap my head around
Mm.
the line by line. So you've got, some opening information for the reader, and then you break it down, the preamble, the grievances, the formal declaration, the signatures, but you do it in a way that is visually appealing and distinctive too. You've got the actual language, and then you have in a different color and a different font, the decoded language, the today's language that instantly make the document accessible and instantly make the reader see, oh, this is how and why it's applicable today. So for me, going line by line, I was relearning and learning at the same time. And I'm wondering, as you've written this book, as you have written your other books as well, like have you found that some of us today perhaps have some misconceptions of what this document was or consisted of, maybe even misinterpreted as you decode it for us? I'm just curious about, from your experience, what others might take away from it or have a new understanding as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The two biggest issues that people have with the Declaration, the biggest misunderstandings, kind of go together. Um, they think it's the Constitution. People get those mixed up a lot, and that's understandable. But they're also very different documents. The Constitution being the "We the People" one, the Declaration, the "When in the course of human events" one.
Yeah.
Um, the Declaration does not have the force of law. The Constitution, of course, is the highest law in the land, and that's a really critical difference. The Declaration was not written to be law. Um, there was nothing governing the country until they wrote the Articles of Confederation, and it was just the Second Continental Congress running things. And who gave them that authority? It's a crisis. We're doing what we can. Um, so they tried to fix that, with the Constitution. The Declaration does not have the force of law, but it does have the force of poetry and principle. Historian Pauline Maier called the Declaration American scripture, which I think is a great phrase. And Abraham Lincoln called it the electric cord that binds patriotic hearts. Is it binding? That he talked about how the high immigration in his period, the mid 1850s, had tremendous numbers of Germans and Irish in particular coming over. He said so many people are here who were not here in the founding generation, and they are still fully a part of us
Yeah.
because they are a part, even though they may not be descended from somebody who was around at the time of the revolution, they are descended from this document. It's that important to us that
Mhm.
it binds all of our hearts together, those in the past and those who are to come. And this peculiarly Lincoln-esque, beautiful phrase, beautiful imagery.
Yeah.
I think it's a lovely idea.
Now, as the book releases and makes its way into readers' hands, young and older, what is your hope for the book or your hope for readers who do get the chance to read it?
I hope that I hope that they'll read it. I hope that they'll read the document. If they don't read this book, then read the Declaration. Uh, I hope that they will remember that we do have political principles. We don't just make this up as we go along, that we are a nation of laws, not of men, um, that the ideals, all men are created equal. This speaks to us today as much as it did at that point. The idea that there is no second class citizenship. Colonists were rebelling at the idea that they were not being treated equally to people in England, and they were right. It's when we talk about no taxation without representation. It's not just the taxation part, although they didn't like that, but the idea that their political rights were being violated. And they knew that. They knew about the Revolutionary Settlement of 1689, which honestly we don't today. But they did. And they knew that they were being treated as second-class citizens, and that was not okay. There is no second-class citizenship. So Jefferson began that document by declaring a right of revolution. He ended by invoking that right. If the government does not, the people don't exist for the government. The government exists for the people. It's supposed to make people safer, wealthier, give them more opportunities. And if it does not do that, it can be changed.
Yeah.
Um, so I hope people remember that, um, at least that all men are created equal.
Yeah. It's a comforting reminder, during some
Yeah,
hard times. It really is.
yeah. We have been in peril before, and we have come through before.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it's Thomas Paine who wrote Common Sense, which helped pave the way for the Declaration. It came out in January of 1776. And George Washington was living in a tent, commanding troops fighting against King George III, and still toasted the king every day until he read Thomas Paine's Common Sense. And that was the day Washington stopped toasting the king. Um, but Thomas Paine said, "We have it in our power to begin the world again." And so do we.
Oh, what a beautiful sentiment to end on. That was lovely. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming here today, but for reminding us just how important our early history is and how it has shaped what we are today, what we still could be later. Where is the best place for listeners to find you online so that they could, go through your backlist, keep up on what else might be coming, especially those newer books that you said are going to be coming next? Tell us the places.
My website is katiekennedy.com. People can find me at Katie Writes Books with no O's, BKS, on Threads and on Blue Sky.
Okay. I will collect those links and put them into the show notes so listeners can click on them easily. And I'll, of course, put a link to the Declaration Decoded, which
Thank
everybody
you.
should go read. And I just want to thank you again for making the book so interesting and accessible and giving us those important reminders that are especially important today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of Kidlit Love, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Kidlit Love podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find Kidlit Love on Substack. That's where you'll find posts for each episode, monthly Kidlit roundups, and an invitation to join my summer book club and go deeper into the world of children's literature. And if you loved this podcast and want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of kid lit love. Thanks for listening.